Confidence doesn't show up like a parade. It doesn't bark orders, crush hands with try-hard grip strength, or paste on a smile to hide a racing heartbeat. Real confidence doesn't sprint to fill every silence or drown the room in words. It's quieter than that, almost invisible at first. Think of someone who can sit in a room and not need to perform. No proving, no peacocking, just presence. When the world expects you to jump, and you don't, that's power. It's not apathy, it's restraint with a purpose. A calm that becomes its own language. A signal to allies. A shield against manipulation, and when needed, a weapon. Here's the game most people never notice. Attention is currency. Every time you react, you pay. Every explanation you overgive, every text you rush to send, every defense you mount to clear your name, that's you bleeding value. The nonchalant man doesn't spend like that. He guards his emotional budget. He doesn't chase people. He doesn't explain his worth. He makes others earn his time, his words, his attention. That isn't laziness, it's mastery. It says, I am centered, and your storm won't move me. Rivals hate it because they can't get a grip. Friends respect it because it's steady. Enemies? They swing at shadows, waiting for a reaction that never comes. And when it never comes, they tire out. Machiavelli would call this the quiet mask of dominance. Nonchalance isn't a personality quirk you're born with. It's a discipline you train. Most people are reactive by habit. An insult lands. They bite. A crisis hits. They panic. A temptation appears. They leap. They treat silence like a vacuum and rush to stuff it with noise so they feel in control. That's why nonchalance unnerves them. It denies the script they're used to. Loud, expressive, outwardly emotional people make themselves easy to read and easy to manipulate. But the one who gives you nothing? He's the threat. You can't map his next move. That uncertainty forces hesitation, and hesitation is where power lives. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler should appear unshaken whether the state is thriving or burning, because perception bends reality. If people believe you're immovable, they treat you as immovable. Soon, they organize themselves around that belief. That's the moment stillness becomes psychological warfare. You do less, they do more. You reveal little, they reveal a lot. Your silence pressures them into showing their tells, what they want, what they fear, where they're weak. Without a pattern to read, the human mind fills in the blanks with its own anxieties. You get cast as larger, smarter, more dangerous than you even need to be. And then you win without raising your voice. Nonchalance also breaks the tools people use to control you. Propaganda needs your outrage. Bait requires your bite. Guilt only works if you rush to defend yourself. The nonchalant man watches the bait drift by, notes it, and lets it sink. That's it. In doing nothing, he forces the manipulator to overplay their hand. They burn energy. They get sloppy. They expose their strategy. Understand, nonchalance isn't passive. It's active control. It's timing. It's the difference between reacting and deciding. In business, the one who doesn't hurry often sets the terms. In dating, the person who can walk away without blinking owns their frame. In leadership, the calm voice when the building is metaphorically on fire becomes the anchor everyone gravitates to, simply because chaos makes people crave someone steady. Own that role, and the dynamic flips. You stop begging for acceptance. You let others audition for a place in your world. You stop scrambling for position. Your presence has already drawn a circle, and they step into it. There's no magic. It's psychology. When you give nothing away, people project meaning onto you. They assume depth where there's silence, strategy where there's control. In that fog, they hesitate, misread, and overshare, while you sit still, watching clearly. Then you move only when it matters. You speak only when silence has done most of the work, and when you do act, it lands like an earthquake, not because you're flashy, but because you're rare. This is hard because the world trains you to react. Our lives run on fast forward, pings, prompts, pressure. Everyone wants you on their tempo. The nonchalant man sets his own. He delays. He pauses. He breathes. He withdraws so he can return with gravity. Presence becomes a statement precisely because it isn't constant. When he speaks, people lean in. When he moves, rooms shift. Not because he's the loudest, but because he's the hardest to predict, the hardest to provoke, the hardest to replace. He becomes the gravitational center without theatrics. His calm commands more than 1,000 speeches. And the bonus? Practicing this doesn't just change how others see you. It changes how you see yourself. You stop chasing closure. You choose when and how to engage. Your nervous system learns to stay steady under pressure. The world stops dictating your rhythm. You start conducting the room. That's the magnetism of restraint. The less you leak, the more people want access. But understand the edge. Nonchalance isn't numbness. It's selective caring. You feel deeply, but you don't spend emotional energy cheaply. You treat attention like gold and invest it only where it compounds into power, clarity, or growth. In a culture addicted to reaction, that discipline is rare, and rare is irresistible. Nonchalance isn't weakness. It's active control. It's the difference between reacting out of panic and moving with intent. In business, the man who doesn't rush into a deal often ends up with the best terms. In relationships, the one who can walk away without flinching always has the upper hand. In leadership, the calmest figure in the room, when the fire alarm goes off, instantly becomes the anchor others look to. People crave stability in chaos, and if you can be that still point, not because you fake it, but because you've trained for it, you quietly seize command. This flips the entire dynamic of power. You stop chasing validation. Others start chasing yours. You stop scrambling to prove yourself. Others start competing for the space you've already claimed with your presence. This isn't sorcery. It's psychology. The moment you stop broadcasting your feelings, people start projecting meaning onto you. They assume depth where there's silence. They imagine strategy where there's only control. And in that gap, they hesitate, they miscalculate, and they reveal themselves, while you sit calm, reading the entire board more clearly than they ever could. Here's where it gets dangerous. When you finally do move, when you finally do speak, it shakes the ground. Because stillness, when broken, is deafening. That's why nonchalance is rare. It demands a level of internal discipline most people never develop. It requires rewiring how you respond to urgency. The average person lives at the world's tempo, always pinged, always prompted, always pulled in every direction. They move at the beat of someone else's drum. The nonchalant man sets his own rhythm. He slows down, he pauses, he breathes. And when he moves, the shift is unmistakable. Because he wasn't always in motion. His presence becomes a rare event, and rare things command attention. That's the magnetism of restraint. The man who speaks less makes every word heavier. The man who acts rarely makes every action reverberate. He isn't the loudest, but he's the hardest to provoke, the hardest to predict, the hardest to replace. He becomes the gravitational center of any room without asking for it. People lower their voices around him. They weigh their words. They check themselves. Why? Because he doesn't. His composure sets the standard, and they adjust. But understand, nonchalance isn't about being detached from life. It's about being selective. You care, but only about the right things. You spend emotional energy like gold, investing only where it returns clarity, growth, or power. That selectivity makes you rare, and rare is irresistible. In a world that constantly reacts, your refusal to be pulled into every storm makes you magnetic. It's also a weapon. Nonchalance can be defense, but it can just as easily be offense. People reveal themselves when you give them nothing. The overeager will overshare. The insecure will overextend. The manipulative will overplay their hand. Why? Because they crave response. They need feedback to know where they stand. And when you stay still, when you hold your center, they start guessing. And guessing always leads to mistakes. Think about it. Someone insults you, and you don't respond. They begin to wonder what you're thinking. Someone pressures you, and you stay calm. They start fearing what you might know. Someone tries to provoke you, and you remain composed. Suddenly, they're the one off balance. That's not passivity, it's precision. You're converting their urgency into your leverage. You're turning their noise into your silence, and your silence into their unraveling. This is the essence of mystique. People are wired to chase puzzles. We're drawn to what we can't easily define. The moment someone becomes too predictable, too transparent, too available, we move on. But the man who holds back, who keeps just enough locked behind composure, becomes intriguing. People project onto him. They fill in the blanks with their fears, their fantasies, their assumptions. They often grant him more strength, more power, more intelligence than he actually needs. He becomes a myth, not because he claimed it, but because he allowed others to write it for him. But here's the catch. Wielding this power takes discipline. It's not enough to just be quiet or withdrawn. Every silence has to be deliberate. Every pause must be weighted. Your absence should be felt, not ignored. When you leave, the room should notice. When you speak, the silence should echo afterward. That's rhythm control. And once you set the rhythm, you set perception. And perception, in business, in relationships, in politics, is reality. That's why history's greatest power players weren't always the strongest or loudest. They were often the stillest. They understood presence. They could walk into a room and change the atmosphere without saying a word. They could stand calm while others shouted, and in that contrast, everyone else made themselves smaller. Panic makes mistakes. Stillness turns mistakes into currency. And whoever controls the rhythm controls the game. Nonchalance doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you choose what deserves your energy. You're not detached from the world. You're selective. You're not passive. You're patient. You're not indifferent. You're immune to noise. The world screams for attention. It begs for constant reaction. It thrives on performance. And in the middle of that chaos, you stand still. That's not weakness. That's sovereignty. But don't confuse stillness with inaction. The nonchalant man acts, but when he does, it's surgical. It's sudden. It's rare. And because it's rare, it carries weight. He doesn't waste words. He doesn't flood people with his thoughts. He doesn't broadcast every plan. He observes. He waits. And when the right moment arrives, he strikes with precision. That's why his presence has gravity. That's why his words echo. That's why others fear his movement. Because restraint makes impact heavier. This is how respect is built, not by explaining yourself endlessly, not by chasing validation, but by withholding. The less you offer, the more people crave it. And when you finally give it, they treat it like gold. Nonchalance isn't arrogance. It's autonomy. It's power without force. People sense it. They lower their voices in your presence. They measure their men. They weigh their words. They adjust themselves because you don't. You've already chosen your rhythm, and you don't break it for noise, for praise, or for threats. This restraint doesn't just defend you. It becomes a fence. It sets emotional traps without ever appearing to, while others scramble to prove themselves, to explain, to perform. You're simply watching. And in that stillness, they overstep. They reveal their fears. They expose their intentions, all because they can't handle the vacuum your silence creates. They crave feedback. They need a reaction to measure their place. And when you give them none, they stumble. They guess. And in guessing, they make mistakes. Think of it like this. Someone insults you, and you stay silent. Suddenly, they're unsure if you didn't hear, didn't care, or are plotting something bigger. Their own mind becomes the weapon against them. Someone pressures you and you remain calm. Now they wonder what you know, what you're hiding, what leverage you hold. Someone tries to control the situation, but your composure makes them lose control. Nonchalance flips pressure on its head. It doesn't just resist, it weaponizes. This is psychological precision. Because the nonchalant man isn't just unaffected, he's calculating. He converts tension into leverage. He turns other people's urgency into his advantage. He lets them spill their strategies, reveal their weaknesses, show their hand while he sits, unreadable. And that unreadability is the core of mystique. It turns you into a puzzle people can't stop trying to solve. Human nature is wired to chase puzzles. What's simple, we dismiss. What's predictable, we exploit. But what's mysterious, we respect. People start projecting their fears, desires, and fantasies onto you. They make you into something larger than you are. And you don't even have to play into it, you just don't interfere. You let the myth grow around you. That's how stillness turns into legend. But there's a warning here. Too much stillness becomes paralysis. If you hold back when action is required, you lose. A general who never gives orders loses his army. A negotiator who never makes a move loses the deal. A man who hides behind composure forever risks becoming irrelevant. Nonchalance is not avoidance. It's not hiding. It's choosing the right moment with ruthless precision. Another trap, wearing the mask so long you start believing it. If you confuse the tool for your identity, you hollow yourself out. You become untouchable, not because you're powerful, but because you're empty. Remember, nonchalance is strategy, not soul. Machiavelli himself warned that true power is adaptability. Ice in winter, fire in summer, in composure in public, warmth in private. The point is not to be cold forever. The point is to know when coldness is the sharpest edge. The strongest figures in history weren't statues. They weren't stone-faced at all times. They were strategic. They decided when to reveal emotion, when to show vulnerability, when to connect. And because they chose their moments, those moments hit harder. True nonchalance isn't about being unreachable. It's about being unreadable. It's not about never showing feeling. It's about deciding when, where, and with whom you show it. That's the balance. You stay composed in the storm, but you're not afraid to bleed by the campfire. You stay unreadable in negotiation, but warm with loyalty in private. Because power isn't in pretending you don't care, it's in controlling when and how you show that you do. That's what keeps you dangerous, respected, and above all, human. Nonchalance at its peak is not laziness. It's a performance with purpose. Every pause matters. Every silence carries weight. Every absence is felt. This is rhythm control. And once you own the rhythm, you own perception. And perception, whether in war, in business, in love, is reality. History proves it. The greatest rulers didn't always have the most armies or wealth. What they had was presence. They could walk into a room and shift the atmosphere without a word. They could stand still while rumors swirled, letting others exhaust themselves with speculation. That stillness wasn't passivity. It was a tightening rope. The longer they waited, the more their rivals trapped themselves. That's the brilliance of nonchalance. It lets enemies destroy themselves. You don't have to shout, defend, or argue. You do nothing, and they unravel. Aggression needs oxygen. Chaos needs participants. The moment you refuse to fuel it, it collapses under its own weight. And when it collapses, you're the only one still standing. In today's world, this is more valuable than ever. Everyone's desperate to be seen, to react, to post, to argue. Attention is scattered like confetti. But the one who withholds, who doesn't always respond, who doesn't always show up, that's the person people chase. Because scarcity builds desire. Familiarity kills it. The man who is constantly available is taken for granted. The man who appears on his own terms becomes unforgettable. This doesn't mean you vanish into isolation. It means you manage exposure. Your presence becomes intentional, not accidental. You choose when to speak, when to appear, when to withdraw. And because of that, your words land heavier. Your absence creates tension. Your return feels like an event. That is gravity. But here's the twist. Nonchalance isn't just defense. It's offense. It's the art of setting traps. You stay quiet while others overexpose themselves. They reveal too much, too soon. They underestimate you. They think your calm means disinterest. And just when they feel safe, you move. Swift, precise, and unexpected. That's the strike they never saw coming. The beauty is that you don't need to be the smartest or strongest. You only need to be the one who doesn't flinch first. Because panic is contagious. When you don't panic, people start wondering what you know that they don't. Doubt spreads. Hesitation grows. And in hesitation lies your advantage. This is the psychology of power. The one who stays still the longest owns the moment. The one who reacts first usually loses. That's why Machiavelli said perception is reality. If you appear unshaken, people treat you as unshaken. If you appear in control, people follow your control. And slowly, you become exactly what they believe you are. But there are dangers too. Too much detachment can corrode connection. People need to feel seen. If you never show emotion, never reveal vulnerability, they may start to doubt your loyalty. They may resent your mask. Nonchalance without warmth turns you into a wall. And walls don't attract, they isolate. The art is balance. Cold in war, warm by the fire. Unreadable in the crowd, open with those who've earned it. Because the point of nonchalance isn't to be a statue. It's to wield emotion like a weapon. To choose when to hide it and when to show it. The wrong timing makes you look indifferent. The right timing makes you unforgettable. The greatest danger of all, believing your own mask. If you start thinking composure is strength in every situation, you'll hollow out. You'll stop connecting. You'll confuse apathy for control. And when that happens, you're no longer powerful. You're just empty. Nonchalance is a blade, not a shield to live behind. Use it too often, and it cuts you instead. So the lesson is clear. Stillness is a tool. It's not who you are, it's what you wield. The moment you forget that, you stop being the strategist and start being the prisoner of your own performance. The world doesn't need statues. It needs rulers who know when to be stone, when to be fire, and when to be flesh. That's true Machiavellian control. At its core, nonchalance is about rhythm, yours, not the world's. Most people are dragged by the noise of others. They rush to explain, to defend, to prove. But the man who has mastered composure is different. He sets the tempo. He moves when he decides, not when pressured. And because he moves less often, each move carries greater weight. Think about it. If you're always available, always speaking, always explaining, you become predictable. Predictable is cheap. Predictable is controllable. But when you're rare, when your words are chosen, when your reactions are deliberate, you become valuable. You become the puzzle no one can solve. And that unsolved puzzle pulls people deeper into your orbit. This doesn't mean being silent all the time. Silence without intent is emptiness. The real art is to know when stillness is strength and when action is required. Too much composure can become paralysis. Too much detachment can turn into indifference, and indifference corrodes trust. People need to feel your presence, not just your distance. They need to see you warm with allies, even if you're cold with rivals. They need to know you can bleed in private, even if you never flinch in public. Because power isn't about being emotionless. It's about deciding when and how emotion is revealed. The great leaders of history weren't hollow statues. They were human, but disciplined humans. They could weep at a funeral and remain unshaken in war. They could charm at a dinner and stand steel-faced in negotiations. Their secret wasn't suppression. It was selection. That's where most people fail. They confuse restraint with apathy, composure with cowardice. They hide from life instead of controlling their presence within it. Nonchalance is not escape. It's engagement on your terms. You don't let the world pull you into its storms. You choose when to step in, when to step back, and when to let others exhaust themselves. But there's a deeper warning here. If you wear the mask of calm too long, you risk believing it is who you are. You start mistaking the armor for the man. And when that happens, you stop adapting. You become rigid, and rigidity is the beginning of decline. Machiavelli's lesson was never to be cold forever. It was to be adaptable. Fire when needed, ice when necessary, silence when it serves, words when they strike hardest. The true danger is forgetting that nonchalance is a weapon, not an identity. A blade kept sheathed forever rusts. A mask worn too long consumes the face beneath it. If you let stillness define you completely, you stop being strategic, you become hollow. And hollow men are eventually broken. So here's the real Machiavellian law. Be unreadable but never irrelevant. Stay composed but never inert. Rise above the noise, but never so far that you can't hear the signal. Stillness is not peace. It's the poised edge of a hidden blade. And the man who masters it never needs to shout, never needs to beg, never needs to prove. Because when others are rattled, you remain steady. When others overreact, you conserve. When others waste their energy, you sharpen yours. And when the moment comes, you strike with precision. That's why the calmest man in the room wins. Not because he's stronger, but because everyone else plays into his rhythm. In the end, nonchalance is sovereignty. It's the state where nothing outside of you dictates your response, where silence can be more terrifying than rage, where your absence carries as much power as your presence. And once you learn this, once you embody it, you no longer chase respect. You command it. That's the lesson. Stillness is not surrender. It's not passivity. It's not emptiness. Stillness is control. It's the quiet weapon, the invisible shield, the poised edge that only strikes when it chooses. And when you wield it with mastery, you never need to raise your voice again.